The voices were not very clear, and she had to strain to understand what they were discussing. The first voice, firm and confident, belonged to her husband, Infante Alfonso. The second voice, soft and almost obsequious, she did not recognize. Soon, a name was mentioned, and Violanta nodded. The second speaker was the bishop. Along with the heir to the throne of Castile and Leon, he was discussing her fate and the prospects of her recent marriage. "It's been too little time, Your Highness," the bishop said condescendingly. "The church cannot annul your marriage on such grounds. Princess Violanta will yet bear you heirs." The young Infanta, eavesdropping on the palace staircase, quietly lifted her skirts and hurried back to her chambers. Now, all she could do was pray. Violanta was born in Zaragoza around the middle of the 13th century. She was the product of a union meant to strengthen ties between the East and the West, a Hungarian princess and the King of Aragon. Her warrior father, Jaime the Conqueror, was constantly expanding the borders of his considerable realm, so his eldest daughter rarely saw him. However, she was very close to her mother, who taught her the language of her homeland, along with its tales and legends. Thus, the princess absorbed much of the culture of distant Hungary. When the princess turned 10, her father planned a dynastic marriage between her and the Infante of Castile. Jaime the Conqueror needed an ally in the fight against the Moors. The groom was 15 years older than the bride, but was considered an attractive and highly educated man. The wedding took place when she was 11. Too young to fulfill her wifely duties, the newlyweds were housed separately. It was at this moment that Alfonso realized the mistake he had made. Violanta could not provide him with heirs in the near future, and he had plenty of brothers ready to claim power in the kingdom. Having a son would ensure Alfonso's legitimacy as an infante. So how long would he have to wait? This became the first trial for young Violanta when she understood that her husband, having just entered into marriage, intended to dissolve their union. How eagerly she had traveled to Castile. The church did not approve of the Infante's proposal. He was advised to leave things as they were. As for his young wife, their closeness developed 2 years later. At that time, the princess and her husband took a rest near Alicante. When Alfonso learned that Violanta had become pregnant after this stop, he dubbed their resting place the Plain of Good Sleep. This name has persisted to this day. The following year, Violanta gave birth to their first child. Thus, she had to endure yet another trial. The boy died shortly after birth. But Violanta experienced the joys of motherhood fully, becoming a mother 11 more times. Soon, she gained the status of Queen of Galicia, Castile, and Leon. The young queen was crowned in Burgos. In the 6 years of their marriage, Alfonso had come to appreciate his wife's virtues, so he spared no expense for the grand ceremony. Violanta received numerous gifts, the right to manage affairs in the palace, and the authority to address important matters when her husband was away from home. And this turned out to be the most challenging aspect for her, as Alfonso was often absent. The reason was that Violanta's husband cherished the dream of obtaining the crown of the Holy Roman Empire. He was so close when Alfonso was proclaimed King of Germany, but he faced a serious rival, the English Prince Richard, and against this contender, Alfonso had long and hopelessly schemed. Violanta, though she was called the Queen of 4 kingdoms, Galicia, Castile, Leon, and Germany, rarely ventured beyond the city of Burgos. Her large family consumed all her time, leaving her with barely a moment to study her books. Like many queens of her time, Violanta was also expected to engage in pious endeavors, which led her to establish the Santa Clara and San Pablo monasteries in honor of a saint particularly beloved in Hungary. When her and Alfonso's eldest son, Fernando, turned 11, it was decided that he should marry. Among all the potential brides, they chose Blanca, the daughter of the King of France. The girl was brought to Burgos 2 years later, and they immediately held the wedding. This young girl turned out to be quite a challenge for Queen Violanta. Blanca Capet, daughter of Louis IX, was a strong-willed young woman who quickly gained considerable influence over her husband and began to assert her opinions. Above all, Blanca was eager to wear the crown as soon as possible. When the Infanta gave birth to a son, her behavior became even more arrogant. Alfonso had plenty of other issues to contend with and didn't want to deal with family squabbles. The peace of his kingdom was threatened by the Emir of Granada, prompting the need for a military campaign. The Castilians were losing, and Prince Fernando set out to assist them, but he was stopped by a sudden illness, resulting in the loss of the heir to the throne. This created a very complicated situation that neither Alfonso nor Violanta could resolve alone. Who would inherit the throne after Fernando? The Infanta had a son, but the king had other sons as well. Blanca immediately asserted her claims. She envisioned herself as regent for the young prince. The King of France expressed his willingness to support her position. The king's second son, Sancho, also believed the throne belonged to him. Since the king did not want to quarrel with any of his heirs, he made a Solomon-like decision. He granted a small vassal kingdom to his grandson, where Blanca could pursue her ambitions, while all other lands were secured for Sancho. What sparked the conflict is unclear. Some historians believe that Blanca's excessive ambitions fueled the fire, leading Sancho to convene a meeting of the Cortes. The assembly decreed that all kingdoms belonged to Sancho, and King Alfonso was relieved of his duties, while the care of the young prince, Fernando's son, would fall to Queen Violanta. The family was divided, and this became Violanta's final serious trial. Her husband and son battled each other for power, as Alfonso refused to acknowledge Sancho as king. The deposed monarch lived only 2 more years after this, unable to recover from the turmoil. Violanta chose to return to her native Aragon. From there, she kept an eye on events in Castile, how Sancho became the absolute ruler and how his eldest son would inherit the throne after him. She died in the early 14th century and was buried in the convent she had founded herself. Perhaps you're curious about what happened to Blanca? Having not received the crown she longed for, she returned to Paris and lived a prosperous life until the age of 70.